Feel free to interrupt me throughout the presentation if you have specific questions. If you want to put something in the chat, you can feel free to do that as well. I am not great about presenting and being able to check the chat at the same time. So I'll go through the chat questions at the end. So again, if I'm on a slide and you've got a question, feel free to interrupt. And then I'll leave some time at the end too for questions or discussion. But thank you all for taking time to come to this voter registration training for Franklin County, Ohio. Most of what we're going to be talking about here is general information that is relevant anywhere in the state of Ohio, but I do have some specific Franklin County information, mostly about where you can go to early vote or what's going to be on our ballots this year. So this is where we're going to talk about who can vote, the mechanics of voter registration, the different ways that you can vote here in Ohio. We're also going to talk about nonpartisan voting resources and what it looks like when you volunteer at a league voter registration event, how that works, the administrative details behind that in case you had any questions. And then because I know there is a lot going on in the legislative world, both statewide and nationally, I did put a little bit of information about pending voter law changes. I wanted to put that at the end because I didn't want anyone getting confused about the difference between our current laws and any future changes to voter laws. So what we're going through right now are the rules we'll be following this spring and summer, and those will not change no matter what happens with the state and national laws or legislation that's pending. So first, who can vote in Ohio? You have to be a U.S. citizen. You must be an Ohio resident 30 days before Election Day. This ends up being a kind of non-starter issue because our voter registration deadline to vote in an upcoming election is 30 days before the election. So as long as someone turns in their voter registration form on time, they will be an Ohio resident for voting purposes by Election Day. You need to be 18 by Election Day. This is important because we have the opportunity to register 17-year-olds who are going to be 18 by November 4th, 2025. And in fact, we at the League have been doing quite a bit of that by going into high schools and talking to high school seniors and getting them registered when they're 17. So if you're at a voter registration event this summer and you're talking to somebody who's 17, they can start the process right now and get registered as long as they're going to be 18 by November 4th. And fourth, and this is the requirement that I like to point out as often as possible because there's a lot of confusion about it. You can register and you can vote in the state of Ohio as long as you're not currently serving time for a felony conviction. So the reason there is confusion about this is because in other states, if you have a felony on your record, you lose the right to vote in that state forever for the rest of your life. In Ohio, as long as you are not currently in jail or prison for that felony conviction, you can vote. So this means several things. If you're in a halfway house, you can get registered and you can vote. If you're on probation, you can vote. If you are in jail for a misdemeanor, you can vote. So there's lots of that kind of gray area, and usually the answer is that you can vote. So make sure that you are mentioning this at different outreach events because there are a lot of people in Ohio who aren't voting because they assume they can't. Now, the next 3 slides are going to be the voter registration form, and I've chopped it up into 3 pieces just so everyone can see it. But this is all on one 8.5 by 11 page. And this form is used anywhere in Ohio. So any county in Ohio will use this form to register someone to vote. And you can use it to update your voter registration. You can use it to change your address, change your name, and also register for the first time. There is actually a new registration form that the Ohio Secretary of State put out just recently, actually just a few weeks ago, that encompasses some of the legal changes that we have here in Ohio for voting laws in 2025, and I'll show you the details of that later. But the top part of the form remains unchanged. And this is what individuals will fill out if they are registering for the first time. So if you're a US citizen, if you're going to be at least 18 years of age on or before the next general election, then you'll have the person put their name, their address, their birth date, and then their Ohio driver's license number or the last four digits of their social security number. So if you don't have an Ohio driver's license number, but you have an Ohio ID, you can use that number as well. And then the phone number in box 11 is voluntary, but I always encourage people to put that down because if the person that is inputting this data at the Board of Elections has a question, and there's no phone number, there's no easy way for them to reach out to the voter to ask. This middle part of the form, you'd only fill out if you are updating your address or changing your name for purposes of voting. And then finally at the end, this is where the form looks a little different in 2025 because we have this change an election law where volunteers are no longer able to fill out a form for the voter, which is something we used to encourage volunteers to do, especially for individuals who may have trouble reading or writing, may have a disability, or, just sometimes I filled out one for somebody who just said they had terrible handwriting and they would rather that I just fill it out for them. Of course, the voter always would need to sign and date the form themselves. So under this new law, volunteers are not allowed to make a mark on the voter registration form. There is one exception to this, and you can see this on the right side of the screen, bottom right. There's a checkbox, and then next to it, it says, I completed this form on behalf of an applicant due to a disability, blindness, or illiteracy. I attest that the applicant indicated that she desired to register to vote or update the applicant's name or residence. And then you, as the volunteer, would sign below that attestation. So, general rule of thumb, we as volunteers should not be filling this form out or assisting a voter to fill the form out anymore. There is, if you are assisting somebody because of, one of these three reasons that's listed here, disability, blindness, or illiteracy, and you're willing to put your name, you can do that. But, we recommend that the voter fill out the form as much as possible. So any questions about this change? Okay, something else to know is that we can still use the old voter registration forms that don't have this box in the bottom right-hand corner. The Franklin County Board of Elections does still accept the old version of the form. However, if you do complete a form on behalf of a voter, you do need to use this new form. And I will be collecting and printing and using new forms this summer when we do voter registration outings. Okay, so common errors on the form that you want to take a minute and look at after a voter has filled out the form is that often they've missed a checkbox, they forget to put their ID number down, or they put their birth date where they're supposed to put today's date. A few other errors that we commonly see is that someone lists the country. I think it's box 8 asks for your county, so it'd be Franklin County. A lot of people put United States. Generally, the Franklin County Board of Elections won't reject the form if someone puts United States, but it is good just to have the form be as correct as possible. And if you notice a mistake on the form, you can have an individual cross out the mistake and then write the correct response and just initial it. So you don't have to start over with a totally new form. I think one of the most important things is just to make sure people are writing legibly, because another human being at the Board of Elections is going to have to look at the form and input the data. So if they can't read it, they're not going to be able to put in the information correctly. So really writing legibly is the most important thing. We also cannot put PO boxes for an address. There has to be an actual physical location written on the form, because that's where your precinct is. That's how they decide what your voting precinct will be. You can put a PO box that doesn't really give them a specific location to work from. So I definitely recommend, after the voter fills out the form, asking them to stick around for 30 seconds while you just take a minute and look it over. I know that I often get distracted by conversations when we're out in the field talking to people. And so unless I really take that time to look at the form for somebody else, I'll get back to the office and realize, like, oh no, they forgot to put their birth date on the form, and then that form won't be accepted at the Board of Elections. One other thing I did want to mention here, and it's come up often when we're in high schools talking to younger voters, is that the voter may say, oh, I don't have a signature, so what should I do? The signature does not need to be in cursive, and my recommendation is that they write their name any way that they are able to easily replicate. So the signature on the form is scanned in to the voter database, so that when you go and vote in person, you'll be asked to sign your name, and they will compare that signature with the signature that's on your voter registration form. And they're not super strict about it, but if you come up with this nice cursive signature for the registration form, and then you never use that signature again, and you're not sure like how to sign your name when you come to actually vote, that could potentially be a problem. So just recommend that somebody write their name the way that they normally would or could easily replicate. So if you're volunteering with the league at one of our outreach events, we generally return the registration forms directly to the Board of Elections for the voter. Of course, if the voter wants to return it themselves, they are more than welcome to do so. But if you are a volunteer and you are returning somebody else's forms, you have 10 days after the voter registration form is completed to get that back to the Board of Elections. And it can be taken in person or it can be mailed. The voter registration deadline for the 2025 general election is October 6th. So you have 10 days. However, if you register somebody on October 4th, you don't have 10 days. You have to get it in by October 6th. And then the Board of Elections office here in Franklin County is at 1700 Morse Road. Each county in Ohio has a separate Board of Elections office. So if you, for example, are at the Arts Festival in downtown Columbus and you register some people and they live in Delaware County, those forms are going to have to be delivered directly to the Delaware County Board of Elections. After registering somebody, I like to let them know what they can expect. So within 20 business days of the Board of Elections receiving the registration form, they'll be mailing out information to the voter, letting them know that they are registered to vote, where their polling location is, where their precinct is, and the ID requirements for voting. So you can let voters know to be on the lookout for that, especially with younger voters. I try and emphasize, like, make sure you're checking your mailbox, because I know that for younger people, they may not regularly receive mail, and unfortunately, this type of information is not sent electronically. It's sent hard copy through the U.S. Postal Service. So we talked about the hard copy form, and we generally use that hard copy registration form when we do outreach events. There's another way that you can register to vote in Ohio, and that is online. So as of 2017, you can register to vote online in Ohio. That is through the Ohio Secretary of State's website. And basically, you need the exact same information that you did to register on a hard copy form. Online voting, or I'm sorry, online registration will work for most people. There are a few categories of individuals that won't be able to register online. One is if someone is brand new to Ohio and they don't have a paper trail or an account with an official Ohio government agency like the BMV, or they haven't ever filed Ohio taxes. They'll have to register via a hard copy form, because when you register online, the Secretary of State goes through and looks at other Ohio databases to verify you are who you say you are. That can also be an issue with very young voters as well, if they've never paid taxes in Ohio or they don't have a driver's license. So kind of backing up a step, we've talked about registering to vote. If you are at an event, an outreach event, and someone's not sure if they're registered to vote, or if they're not sure if their registration is up to date, there's a really easy way that you can verify voter registration status in Ohio. That's also online through the Ohio Secretary of State's website. All you need is the person's first, last name, and the county they live in. So here's a screenshot of what that looks like. If I put in my name, Elizabeth Greaser, and I live in Franklin County, and I push search, if nothing comes up, that means that I'm not in the system, so I'm not registered to vote. If my name comes up, but I'm listed at an address and it's an old address, like I haven't lived there for 3 or 4 years, then I also know that I have to update my registration in order to be registered at my current address. And then the other option is that if you're registered, you see your name, your current address, that means you're all set to go. You don't need to do any lookups or things like that. And one of the reasons that we really encourage people to check their voter registration status, oh, I think I must have taken out the slide, is that in Ohio, we have regular voter purges of the voter rolls. So if you haven't voted for at least 4 years, you will get a notice from the Ohio Secretary of State saying you haven't voted for a while. If you don't vote in the next X period, your name will be taken off the rolls. And most voters don't realize that. So especially if you have a voter that just votes in presidential elections, or, and then maybe they skip one of the presidential elections. They may think that they are still registered, but then when they go to vote, it can show that their name has been taken off the voter rolls. And the next voter registration purge, I believe, is scheduled for this summer sometime. So that's something we'll be doing here at the league as well, which is talking to voters about making sure they've checked their voter registration status and that they're all set to vote in November. And there are a number of very valid reasons why the state does these voter registration purges. One is they want to keep the voter rolls up to date. So, they take off people that have passed away or people that have moved out of state. We do know from experience that these voter purges are not perfect. There are always people on the list that are taken off, and they just are put on there by mistake. So we take our role very seriously in making sure that the lists are as clean as possible and that we encourage voters to look up their registration status. Okay, so that was kind of the registration side of things. If you're at an outreach event and you register someone to vote and you have time afterwards, the next thing to talk about is a voting plan. So great, you registered, but do you know what the next steps are? So our next election is going to be November 4th, which is a general election. There are 3 ways that we can vote here in Ohio. That's on election day at your local polling location, which is 6:30. I'm sorry, that your local polling location, and it is open 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. Your polling location should be within 1 to 2 miles of your house, and there's some easy ways to look that up through the Franklin County Board of Elections. The second way you can vote is early in person. You can do that one place in each county. Generally, that's at the Board of Elections office, and that is the case here in Franklin County. Early voting is going to start October 7th, and the hours of that are generally business hours. They're open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. There are some additional weekend hours as you get closer to election day. And one thing to keep in mind, and this was a change in the law from about 2 years ago, I think, there's no early voting hours the day before election day. So that day is always a Monday, so there's no voting hours on Monday. The third way you can vote is absentee or mail-in voting. That also starts October 7th. And you must apply for your mail-in ballot by October 28th. In Ohio, ooh, you know what, my slides are a little out of order, but in Ohio, we are a state where you don't need to have a specific reason why you are applying to vote absentee. So anybody can vote via mail-in ballot. You don't have to show that you're going to be out of town or that you're disabled and you aren't able to get to your polling location. This is what the absentee ballot application looks like. What a voter would do was put in their first and last name, their street address where they are registered to vote, and then the address where they would like the ballot to be mailed to. And this ballot can be mailed anywhere in the United States. So one example would be if you're a college student, let's say you're registered in Columbus, but you go to school at Case Western, so you can get your ballot sent directly to your dorm up in Cleveland. This application needs to be filled out in hard copy and mailed to your local Board of Elections. Unfortunately, you cannot request an absentee ballot via phone or online. So it's a multi-step process. It involves stamps, which, for especially the younger generation is not something that they keep around too much. Based on Ohio law, we are not allowed to give out stamps for to mail these absentee ballot applications because that is considered us giving something of value for somebody to vote. So just a few things to keep in mind. You can start applying for an absentee ballot as soon as the primary is over. So once our primary election on May 6th is over, we'll start having absentee ballot applications available so that if people know for sure they want to vote by mail, they can fill that out and get that sent in. If you are talking to a voter who's not sure if they want to vote in person or by mail, I would advise them to hold off applying for an absentee ballot until they're sure. Because once you send in the absentee ballot application and the Board of Elections mails you a ballot, you're marked down in their system as vote, is that you're going to vote by mail. So if you show up at a polling location on election day and you want to vote in person, you'll have to vote provisionally, which means your vote won't be counted the day of the election until they can go back into their system and show that you haven't also completed your mail-in ballot and submitted that. So they want to make sure that there's no double voting going on. It's definitely possible to vote in person after you've sent in your absentee ballot application, but there's just a couple extra steps there. So in order to eliminate that confusion, if someone's, if it's July and someone's not sure if they want to vote by mail-in or in person, they've still got a lot of time to decide. So I'd advise them not to fill out this form. Okay, let's back up a little bit. If you're voting in person, we have fairly new voting laws as of 2023 here in Ohio about what type of ID is acceptable when you vote in person. And by in person, I mean both on election day and then if you go and vote early at the Board of Elections. So you have to have an Ohio driver's license, an Ohio state ID, a passport, or several forms of military ID. And what these all have in common is that they have your picture on them. Prior to 2023, there were other IDs that were accepted, and that would included your birth certificate, utility bills, bank statements, paychecks. None of those have your pictures on them. So this is an election security safeguard. I will add that Ohio now has the strictest voter ID laws in the nation, so rather a dubious honor. But we are still working hard to get the information out to voters about what they need to bring to vote. So let's say someone brings a utility bill with them as their ID. They will not be turned away on election day. They will still be allowed to vote provisionally, and then they will have 4 days to come back to the Board of Elections office with one of the acceptable IDs to show staff there, and then their provisional vote ballot will be counted. But in reality, what happens is that most voters don't do that follow-up, and then their provisional ballot is not counted. So again, this chart just shows, what we talked about earlier, which is photo IDs are needed for in-person voting. You don't need a photo ID for mail-in voting. You just need to provide your birth date and then the last 4 of your social or your Ohio driver's license number. Okay, so what's on the ballot in Franklin County in November? I'm recording this at the end of April, so right now we don't know for sure exactly what's going to be on the ballot. We do know that we will be voting on local city council races, local school board races, and there will be county judges on the ballot. Ballot issues, those are generally certified in August before the November election, so we really don't have a very good idea at this point of what ballot issues to expect. We do plan on having an additional voter registration training sometime in August where we will be able to present more details of exactly what's going to be on the ballot in Franklin County. Okay, so if you volunteer with the League of Women Voters and you help us by staffing one of our tables at a summer festival, we provide a lot of get out the vote resources and materials. We obviously provide absentee ballot applications and voter registration forms. We have Information about election protection. It is a national hotline that voters can call during early vote and on election day if they experience problems voting, if they have to vote provisionally, if they have a question about what's on the ballot. This is a national hotline. However, it is staffed by Ohio-based attorneys and other voter rights experts on election day. So they do have specific local information for voters. And that hotline is available in English, Spanish, a number of Asian languages, and Arabic. I think that's a complete list of the different languages it supports. And then we'll also have information about vote411.org, which is the League of Women Voters national site. And that is where we have our candidate and issue guides. So right now, in preparation for the May 6th primary elections, we have the Columbus City School Board primary race and all the candidate bios, and they've responded to our questions about why they're running and things like that, as well as Columbus City Council District 7 candidates and statewide issue 2. So whatever the general election candidates and issues are going to be, those will be updated on Vote 411 probably early September. I put some contact information for the Franklin County Board of Elections. They are a wonderful resource. They have a lot of information about where you can look up your sample ballot. You can look up where your polling location is, early vote hours, absentee ballot information, all kinds of things. And then if you are interested in volunteering with the League of Women Voters, last year we hosted over 100 voter outreach and registration events. So the best way to do that is sign up for our weekly Monday morning email newsletter, and that's called the e-voter. All of our voter registration events are listed there, and you can sign up directly through the e-voter. If you haven't volunteered with us before, we always try and partner new volunteers with someone who's experienced so they can help you with the situation. And then after you sign up, you'll be contacted with exact details of what the event is, when you need to arrive, what the materials will be, and what to expect. Okay, so I did want to spend just a few minutes on pending legislation because I've been getting a lot of questions from voters and our members about, what's going on the state and national level. I've had, people think that some of these pieces of legislation are already passed, and so they're confused about, what rules are in place for the 2025 election. So the two major bills that are pending right now, one is the SAVE Act, and that is federal legislation. That would require every American to provide proof of citizenship to register to vote in federal elections. And that proof would need to be presented in person. So this is, these are both pieces of legislation that the league adamantly opposes. And we have a really great one-pager, which I will include to everybody who was on the call today or registered for the call, so that you can read more about it. And we're urging members and voters to contact their senator, their U.S. senator, and say that you oppose the SAFE Act. So this has already passed the House, but it is pending in the Senate. The statewide bill that we're really watching is Senate Bill 153. Oh, this bill does a lot. It also creates a process for verifying citizenship. We believe that that would prevent many eligible voters from voting. It specifically affects married women who may have changed their name when they got married, young people, and people of lower income. We're also very concerned because as the Senate bill is currently drafted, It would be basically impossible for us to have voter registration drives anymore. So you would only be able to register to vote if you went to an official government office, like the Board of Elections. And it would also take out the option of online registration, which is something we currently have in Ohio. And then finally, it would eliminate drop boxes for ballots. I mean, we already are very limited in our drop boxes. We can have one per county, and it's usually right outside of the Board of Elections office, but at least it's available 24 hours a day. So if Senate Bill 153 passed as written, we would not even have that anymore. Again, I will attach the Legislative Services Commission's analysis of that bill in a follow-up so that you can read a little bit more if you're interested about what this bill would do. So currently we're just watching this bill. There's a lot of bills that get introduced into the Ohio legislature. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to go anywhere, but we're definitely keeping an eye on it because if it passes as written, it's really terrible. So I will just leave it at that. And I think that is the end. Hey, Ted, do you have a question? Oh, you're on mute.
As they're currently written, am I correct in saying that the bills only apply, the SAVE Act, for example, only applies to registration? People who are already registered to vote and have been voting will not have to go through the process, the birth certificate, et cetera. Is that accurate?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Good. I would hope so. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
But one question that people or assumption people make is, oh, well, if you have that new um Ohio driver's license, and now I forget the name of it, but like the real ID, yes, the real ID. Oh, well, that shows, right? No, the real ID will not cut it. So you can't just show your, Ohio driver's license that is your real ID. You would have to show additional proof. Any other questions about best practices for registering to vote or
This is Noelle. I have a quick question about the actual registration form itself. I know if everything is successful, a letter will be sent to the newly registered voter with their location and confirmation. But if for some reason there's a problem with the registration form, whether it's they can't read it, whether or not the applicant listed a phone number or an additional point of contact, will the person who's trying to register, will they still receive a letter saying, you know what, this did not go through, we're missing this type of information, or for whatever reason, will they get confirmation either way?
it's a great question. The answer is no.
Okay.
If there is a registration form that's not able to be processed, the voter will not
Here. Okay.
get notice of
Okay.
that. And that's come up before too, where someone will say, "Oh, I'm registered to vote," and then we convince them that to check their registration and that it's not on there.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, the best practice is to go online and check anyway, but okay. Thank you.